Podcasts are a great way to get familiar with developer jargon and keep up to date with the latest industry news. I've written a list of my favourite ones. There's a lot to get through, so if you want to go straight to that list, it's in the video description together with links. So what do I look for in a podcast? Well, the most important thing to me is that they're consistent, they're putting out regular content, and that they're relevant. So I'll look to see when their most recent podcast was. Now, all of these that I'm sharing with you, they're consistent and they're relevant. I also look for chemistry and personality. I want to be entertained because usually I'm listening while I'm having a shave or I'm preparing my breakfast, so I'm getting into my day. It's nice to have a little bit of a chuckle, there be a little bit of banter between the hosts and for them to be having fun. If they're having fun, then I enjoy it much more. I also look for good show notes because they might be talking about something that I want to chase up afterwards. So I think pretty much all of these, they've got websites and they've got very good show notes with links. So I've split these up into three categories. We've got developer-centric, hardware/ecosystem-centric, and business-centric. Developer-centric is self-explanatory. They're talking about frameworks, Swift, Objective-C. They're all developers. Hardware and eco-centric is the platform itself, iPad, iPhone, the watch, how they're being used, the latest industry news in regards to Apple. The business ones, I didn't listen to them to begin with when I was learning iOS because it wasn't what I needed at the time. It wasn't what I felt I needed. But now I'm going to make an effort to, because I want to work as a subcontractor remotely, so I want to be able to have a conversation with my clients about the things that are important to them. And those are things like getting funding for the app, getting featured on the App Store, what makes an app successful, those kind of things. First up, we've got the More Than Just Code podcast. Now, I like this one because it's a large panel. They don't always agree with each other, so they really get into discussion and debate. They're iOS developers, obviously, many of whom write tutorials for the raywinderlicht.com tutorial site. Some of them are from Canada, some from US, some work remotely, some are in salary paid jobs. They have great show notes. They don't have guests on. They discuss the latest things that are going on right now within iOS from a developer standpoint. And if you go on their website, they actually say that they're for people who are developers and for people who want to be developers. And lately they've stayed true to that because I've gotten so much out of this. They've been sharing quite candidly their experience as iOS developers, getting the right salary. They're very open about their salaries and what they're involved in right now. One of them actually was able to tell us, because he got permission, he's working for Disney. So that gives you an idea as to the caliber of the panel. Next up, we have Core Intuition, Daniel Jalkut and Manton Reese. These guys are indie developers. I know Daniel for certain has developed a very successful app. I've learned a lot from them in regards to what it means to be a developer, submitting apps to the App Store, the challenges involved within that, and Apple in general. And they don't have guests on. It's a conversation between the two of them. There's a lot of banter, it's fun, there's good chemistry between the two of them. Manton, he had a salary paid position working remotely, but he left that position to go indie. So it's been interesting following his journey. Next up, the iPhreaks show. This one is more technical. They usually pick a specific topic and delve deep into that for each show. They bring guests on. Recently, I've gotten a lot out of this because they've been talking a lot about Swift, because it's been open sourced, what people are doing with it, the potential it has, the possible futures. So I found it difficult to listen to in the very beginning because of its technical nature. I didn't quite understand what they were talking about, but I've subscribed to it, so if a topic catches my curiosity, I'll listen along. Next up, the raywinderlich.com podcast. Again, this one is a little more technical. They have guests on, great show notes. The host is a UK developer, which makes a nice change. It's rare. And so again, in the beginning, sometimes I wouldn't understand what they're talking about, but it's quality content, quality guests. I would definitely subscribe to it. This brings us on to the next category, which is hardware/ecosystem. Now, there's a ton of these kind of podcasts. I'm going to give you my 3 favorite ones because I've been checking all of them out. The first one is the iOS show. These guys are really intelligent. Recently, they were talking about the battle between FPI and Apple, and I could tell that they just really understand the nuances involved in technology. They're just really bright guys. I would recommend you check them out. These kind of podcasts, ecosystem hardware, you're developing for iOS and Apple, so it makes sense that you understand how these devices are being used. I've learned so much about iCloud, about how people use the iPad Pro and all these kind of things. Next up in this category is the iMore show. Now, these guys really have fun. They've got a YouTube channel. I think they're in all different locations. It's usually a panel of 3. There's good banter between them. Very insightful. They know their stuff. They know the Apple platform. You may notice that I'm saying less and less about these podcasts as opposed to the developer ones because I've only just recently started to delve into these kind of podcasts. Next up is the AppleInsider Podcast. These guys talk about what Apple is up to right now, but they don't just randomly speculate as to what Apple could be up to. They're not just Apple fanboys. They've said that themselves. So it's definitely worth checking out. I found it very intriguing. They've been talking about the possibility of an Apple car. Now, the thing with these podcasts, the hardware and ecosystem ones, is they tend to talk about the same things. So, for example, there was a recent battle between FBI and Apple, and after hearing them talk about it, all of them, for a couple of weeks, it does get a bit of the same thing. So I would recommend pick one and stick with it. For all of these categories, it's unlikely you're going to keep up to date with all of them. So pick at least one in each category and stick with it, get to know them, and that would be my recommendation. This brings us to the final category, which is business. Now, I checked out at least 3 or 4 of these and I narrowed it down to 2 of my favorites. The first one being the App Business Podcast. I really like these guys. They've got a YouTube channel. They're chilled out, they have fun, they know each other. They're chilled out, but they know their stuff. Check these guys out. I really like the vibe. My final recommendation would be App Masters with Steve Young. Steve is Mr. Consistency himself. He's put out 300 podcasts week in, week out. He brings on guests. He asks them how they've been able to be successful as app developers. And so I would recommend you check him out. The winner of all of these, for me, my favorite is the More Than Just Code podcast. It's a great panel, great discussion, great topics, because there's multiple topics. It's the More Than Just Code podcast. And make sure I listen to it every week. They bring it out here in the UK Sunday morning UK time. So that's my recommendation. I hope you got something from this. Until next time, catch you later. Peace.